Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to give to you 40 reasons why Arsene Wenger should lose his job. First of all, I want to say I do appreciate what Wenger's done for this club. I was very lucky to grow up through the times when we won the double twice. We were the Invincibles. All of that I have very fond memories of Wenger for. He has done well to at least keep us in the top four after moving into our expensive stadium, and he was responsible for a lot of that. So I do appreciate a lot of what he's done, but I have to say I'm sick and tired of this untouchable status that he has, and that he's some kind of genius. This man has, in my opinion, lost the plot, and it appalls me that so many fans just stick by him no matter what. And I think it's fans like that are also responsible for our stagnation, because they let Wenger get away with the kind of mediocrity that we seem to be wallowing in for the last 8 odd years. So I'm going to give you 40 reasons why I think Arsene Wenger should go. Some of these might seem quite minor, but I think they all paint quite a big picture. The first reason I think Arsene Wenger should be sacked is because of Manuel Almunia. Now, this may sound like a pretty random reason to want to sack Arsene Wenger, but I actually think Manuel Almunia represents so much of what's been wrong with this club over the last few years. This guy was originally a backup goalkeeper to Jens Lehmann, and in the 2006 Champions League final, a night I always try to forget and block out whenever something sparks a little memory in my head. It was a very painful night. The reason we lost that match wasn't just because Jens Lehmann was an idiot and got sent off. It was because he was replaced by Manuel Almunia, and that night he cost us the match by letting in 2 goals on his near post in the space of about 3 or 4 minutes. So he didn't even learn from the mistake of letting a goal in from the near post. Barcelona saw this and took advantage of it, and we lost the Champions League final. That night, Arsene Wenger should have looked at Almunia and said, "This guy is never going to be good enough for our club." Instead, what happened is he became our first choice goalkeeper for about 5 seasons, and basically this guy cost us so many matches. Against Birmingham, Kevin Phillips, West Brom at home, letting in 3 goals, David Bentley against Tottenham, just countless matches this guy cost us. And the fact that he stayed in the team for 5 years, I think, says so much about Wenger, because he has this opinion of, well, he's good enough, he's just about good enough. We'll let him be in the team. And for your goalkeeper, it's such an important position. And for him to have Almunia in our first team for 5 years says so much about him. Van der Sar won the league for Man U a few years ago. That's how important a goalkeeper is. And we were stuck with Almunia. And I think that's a disgrace and says a hell of a lot about Arsene Wenger. Reason number 2, our lack of motivation going into games, and the fact that most games at half-time are 0-0. How many home games have you been at where there is absolutely no urgency in the first half? It's just the same old passing, with no determination to win the game nice and early. How many games are we still chasing a result in the 80th minute against weaker teams at home? Wenger never seems to get his players out there banging on the door from the first few minutes. He just seems to not care until the 45th minute, and we see this way too much under Arsene Wenger. Number 3, and this is kind of reason for why we never seem to go into a game and hit them for the first 45 minutes, is because we play the exact same formation and tactics in every single game, the same old passing, which only really seems to work after 80 odd minutes when the opposing team is all tired out. Why doesn't Wenger ever play 4-4-2 at home to, say, Stoke or a Bolton kind of team, or Blackburn? He might say it's an outdated formation, but it hasn't done Man United too bad in the Premiership. Pretty much every home game they have against a weaker opposition, they will play 4-4-2. And Wenger's tactics just constantly are the same old passing with no penetration. And also, I think it's a complete myth to say that we play attractive football. There's nothing enjoyable about seeing Ramsey making a back pass every 2 freaking minutes. So his tactics are completely unoriginal. The teams work them out, and a good manager would, switch around his tactics, confuse oppositions. But Wenger goes into every single game, regardless of the opposition, with the same tactics, and I think that says a lot about Arsene Wenger and his lack of flexibility. 4th, why do we not have any strong players in our squad anymore? Back in the day, we had some beasts in our team. The whole back 4, Lauren, Campbell, Martin Keown, Lehmann was huge, Vieira, Gilberto, Perez and Henry were also pretty tall. We had some big team, Emmanuel Petit. We had some really strong players, and it worked wonders for us. Yet nowadays, for some reason, strength is not an attribute that Arsene Wenger is interested in. I find this startling considering how well it worked for him in the past. And when you you actually look at teams like Spain and Barcelona, they do have big players in their team. They have Busquets, Ramos and Piqué are massive, Llorente and all that kind of stuff. All these teams have very big, strong players, but Arsene Wenger doesn't seem to think that strength is an important attribute anymore, and I think that's cost us dearly. His hatred of defensive midfielders. We have still not replaced Patrick Vieira. Even today, we have Arteta as our defensive midfielder, a natural, attacking midfielder, creative player, and it's just cost us time and time again, year after year after year after year. I think the first time I ever really noticed that I think Arsene Wenger was losing the plot of it is the season when we sold Gilberto. We couldn't satisfy Flamini, and we let Diarra go out, and we were left only with Diaby and Song in the defensive midfielder positions. Diaby's not a natural defensive midfielder, and Song was extremely inexperienced at this time. Yet he felt no need to have a strong defensive midfielder. Yet the likes of Gilberto and Vieira and Petit won him leagues. But again, it's another thing that he just doesn't seem that important to him anymore, and I just find that absolutely ridiculous, and we're absolutely crying out for one now, and we probably won't get one, so his lack of defensive midfielders is another reason. Playing players out of position. How many times does Wenger buy an attacking central midfielder and put him out on the wing? It worked once with Pires. He kind of turned Henry into a striker. Pretty much every other attempt he's made to move players around has failed. Aaron Ramsey out on the wing, Andrei Arshavin out on the wing, Nicholas Bentner out on the wing, Diaby in defensive midfielder, Arteta in defensive midfield, although he's just about managed to do it. There were just so many examples of him playing players in the wrong position, and Arshavin, in my opinion, was completely ruined because he wasn't in his natural position. And I just think that a better manager wouldn't make such basic mistakes than playing players in positions where they're almost ineffectual. Diaby also was out on the left wing at some point. I mean, what the hell was all that about? Andrei Arshavin, to me, was a failure at Arsenal because of Arsene Wenger. When this guy came in, he looked incredible, scored 4 goals at Anfield, scored the winner against Barcelona. I thought this guy was going to become a bit of an Arsenal legend, and he pretty much spectacularly failed. And I think one of the reasons for this is Arsene Wenger's inability to handle players with egos. I don't think it's a coincidence he signs young players and French players all the time. It's because he can overpower them, he can gain their respect. He doesn't want to buy a player who'll come in and see the way Wenger works and perhaps question him. And I think that's what happened with Andrei Arshavin. He was a loose cannon, and Wenger couldn't control him. The best managers control these players. They get the best out of them. Mancini with Balotelli, who was 10 times worse than Arshavin, managed to get Balotelli to do pretty well for him. Obviously, that he got sold, but my point is Arsene Wenger can't handle players with big egos and dangerous personalities. So I think we should stay the hell away from players like Wayne Rooney and Luis Suarez. And yeah, he was basically played out on the wing, never in his favoured central position. I don't understand how for the last 2 seasons even though he was on an 80 grand a week contract, he barely ever featured. I just find that absolutely startling how you've got this player who has got the quality and is on such a huge wage, and you never give him a chance in the first team. Another reason I think he should go is his persistent love of Aaron Ramsey. Now, with all fair play to this kid, he did get injured really badly, and just at the end of the season he had some pretty good performances. But how is it Aaron Ramsey always got into the first team, even when he was played out of position? Why was Andrei Arshavin rotting on the bench on 80 grand a week? Yeah, Ramsey, even though he was playing pretty much terribly, kept on starting each and every game. Arsene Wenger never challenges his players. This is something that I really noticed in the last season in particular, is the way in which Wenger never drops players on poor form. The reason why I included Ramsey in this list is because he was playing absolutely terribly for about a year and a half, yet kept on making the team sheet. And I see him doing this quite a lot, especially with Giroud. This guy couldn't hit the target to save his life, yet he kept on starting game in, game out. Same thing for Podolski, who was pretty much ineffectual out on the left wing. Started every single game, and maybe this is either because we just don't have enough depth in our team, or because Wenger doesn't really punish players for not giving 110%. A good manager would say to Ramsey, sorry mate, you're just not playing good enough, you're going to have to improve, sit on the bench. Giroud, you're not playing well enough, tough, you're on the bench. But week in, week out, it was the same starting 11. And I just think that's ridiculous. A good manager Ferguson will give them the hairdryer treatment, and never seems to happen with Arsene Wenger and his favoured players. Talking about favoured players, now, I've always liked Diaby. I've always thought he was a good player. The game when we beat Liverpool 2-0 at the start of last season, he was absolutely immense. His pace, his dribbling, his physicality was fantastic. But let's be honest, this guy is never ever going to make it. He gets injured all the time, and a good manager would say to him, you know, it's sad, but tough luck. You're not good enough for our club. You're not helping us. You're never going to become a well beater. And they would show him the back door. But Wenger's been more than happy to pay this guy God knows how much a week, 50 grand a week, for just doing nothing but sitting on the medical table. And I think it says a lot about Arsene Wenger. Why is it we keep on buying players from Ligue 1 and French players when they're clearly not good enough? One of the reasons why Arsene Wenger did so well back in the old days, and this could actually call into question his ability of a manager, is that France had some world-class players who were winning World Cups, and with Wenger being French, Arsenal was a very attractive option for French players. That and the fact that you got the Eurostar, you're only an hour and a half away from Paris. Arsene Wenger could tempt some of the best players in the world. Now, when he goes after French players, they're pretty much mediocre. You know, Scalacci to Gervinho. Do I need to really go that far? And basically, Wenger's success has, in part, been down to his French players, which once upon a time were good, and now they're not so good. And yet, still, Wenger hasn't changed his policies. And sure, you'll get the odd gem like Chelney. But why did we sign somebody like Giroud just because he's French and he did well in Ligue 1, which is a pretty weak league in my opinion? So enough of the French players already. Talking about Arshavin, he came to our club as the best player in Euro 2008. You know, it was a bit of a coup to get him. I'm surprised another club didn't snap him up. Something I've seen a lot with Arsenal players come to clubs, they seem to regress. Arsene Wenger, they seem to get worse. Now, Moran Chamakh, as terrible as he has been, was a pretty decent player in Liga. Obviously, we know how great that league is, but he did win the league with Bordeaux for a free transfer. He was pretty decent. I think Chamakh could have been good, and he did start off really well. And then what happened to him? He just disappeared into nothingness, just like Arshavin. I think Thomas Vermaelen in his first season was great, scored loads of goals. Now he's on the bench. He's been absolutely terrible. Lots of players do not seem to grow under Wenger like they used to. Chamberlain hasn't really advanced whatsoever since his first season at the club. I really am questioning this myth, well, I think it's a myth, that Arsene Wenger makes players better, because on a lot of evidence they've actually gotten worse at Arsenal. And yeah, again, I think Wenger has to take a bit of stick for this. Something you'll hear a lot from the In Wenger We Trust brigade is the reason we haven't won anything for 8 years is because of Chelsea and Man City and the billionaires' money. Well, to that I would say it didn't seem to affect Birmingham winning a trophy, or Portsmouth winning a trophy, or Swansea, or Wigan winning a trophy, or Tottenham winning a trophy, or Liverpool. All of these clubs have won trophies since we last won the FA Cup in 2005, and Abramovich's billions didn't seem to hurt them. And I guess one of the reasons why I think Wenger should be sacked is because of Birmingham, that final against a team that went down that same year. How we lost that, I will never know. I think it just says everything about Arsenal's tactics as well. Birmingham just played the long ball, defended really well, and they managed to beat us. The goal that Martin scored literally came from a goal kick and a Zigic flick on, and that was good enough to beat us. And that was just an absolute disgrace, quite frankly. And then there was this little chestnut, losing to Bradford, a League 2 team. I don't really need to say anything about that, but we actually had a really strong squad against them as well. People were always like, oh, you know, we had a weak squad. Bradford, you know, it happens every now and again. No, a Premiership's first team should never, ever lose to a League 2 club. Ever. One of the reasons why we haven't won anything in such a long time is because Wenger's insistence of playing weaker teams against clubs that we should be beating, and then us eventually losing to them. For example, this season against Blackburn at home, the FA Cup was one of our strongest chances of winning a trophy and breaking our barren run, but at home he played a very weak squad, and lo and behold, our boring tactics that every club knows how to play against didn't work, and they snuck a goal and beat us. And Wenger constantly, time after time after time, doesn't learn his lessons from getting knocked out in cups by weaker teams, because before this Blackburn game it happened many times before. Man United against Arsenal, Old Trafford, I think in 2007, 2008 maybe. This is when we had a really strong league year. I think we only finished 4 or 5 points behind Man U. We went to Old Trafford, I think just before the Birmingham game. Everyone thinks the Birmingham game is when we lost that season with Eduardo's injury, but actually it might have been the week before when we lost 4-0 to Man U. We went to Old Trafford, a pretty weak team. We had Justin Hoyt defending against Cristiano Ronaldo, and they thrashed us 4-0, and that basically is unforgivable. You don't go to Old Trafford in a cup game and play a weakened squad, and it's just little things like that, which is why it's been 8 years. Any manager with pride would never ever go to Old Trafford and play a weak team. That would just never happen. And then there was the Carling Cup final in the Millennium Stadium in 2007. In the final, Wenger plays the same players that took us to the top, and I kind of like that in a way. You know, you stay loyal to the players that got you to the final, but the fact is, I think winning a trophy for your club's a little bit more important than giving Armand Traore that deserved spot on the left back's place, you know. And we basically played a weak team full of youngsters, and Chelsea beat us 2-1. Drogba just kicked our ass, and you know, back then in 2007, it had only been 2 years since we last won a trophy, so maybe Wenger, you know, was just being faithful to the young kids, and it doesn't look as bad. It looks way worse now that it's been 8 years since we won something, but really it is unforgivable to, you know, just give young players experience rather than win a cup. And I think that says a hell of a lot about Arsene Wenger and some of the players that played that day. Traore, Senderos, Diaby, what's his name, Diarra. Where are they now? Justin Hoyt, where are they now? They're nowhere. Ali Adair, they never made it to the first team, so that experience they got from that night was basically wasted, and we lost a cup because of it. This match, many people remember, but again in the 2008 season, we were actually playing pretty well, and we had Liverpool, I think, 2 games in a row or 3 games in a row. 2 Champions League matches with a league match in between. And in the league match, even though we had a really, really good chance of winning the league, Wenger played young players, and I think it was 1-1 at home to Liverpool, who played us just, you know, the next freaking few days anyway. So it wasn't like we were going to get an advantage of an opposition team because we rested young players. Liverpool were going to be tired anyway. So we didn't play our first team, we drew that match, and eventually we didn't win the league. And had we just gone for it, maybe we would have gotten those extra points, and maybe we would have won the league in 2008, and it didn't happen. And yeah, just yet again, Wenger not taking trophies seriously enough. This one, it just, any time any Arsenal fan tries to defend Arsene Wenger, I'll say 8-2. How the hell could we? It seems to be really very well brushed under the carpet as well by Arsenal. You know, you don't really hear about it much, but that was an absolute disgrace. I think the worst thing about this match wasn't because we got thrashed, because in all fairness, Man U shots did just all go in on target. They were all great shots. It was a hard game, you know, maybe it should have maybe been 3-1 or something like that. But the worst thing about this match was the excuses from Arsene Wenger saying, oh, we had loads of injuries and suspensions. Well, so what, Wenger? Injuries and suspensions are not an excuse. That's why you have something called squad depth. The fact that Wenger ended up buying 6 players in the days afterwards into the transfer window says a hell of a lot about him, because I reckon he genuinely thought that squad that he played that day could have gotten a result, and he probably then would not have to buy any players for the rest of the season. We lost 8-2, and we got just excuse after excuse. And if you actually look at our first team that day, it wasn't that bad. Yeah, like Koscielny was playing, Van Persie, Walcott. We did still have a pretty strong squad, and we lost 8-2, and in my opinion, that is a sackable offence just right there and then. Now, I'm all for socialism. Economically, I'm on the left. I kind of like the idea of people getting the right kind of pay packets, but I'm not so much of a crazy socialist that I don't believe some people deserve to make more money than others. And Wenger's socialist wage structure at Arsenal is a freaking joke. Everyone's always like, oh, we can't afford to give Van Persie 200 grand a week. Yes, we can, because we're paying Bentner, Denilson, Arshavin, Chamak, Schillaci, Park Ji-sung, Denilson, probably said them here before. We're paying all these players about 40, 50k a week, totaling to about 300 grand. So for all these players that never ever play for us, we could have given somebody like Van Persie 250 grand a week. And it's an absolute disgrace. The worst thing about it, even more, is that Wenger himself is getting 140k a week. So it's basically like communism in the way that some people are more equal than others, and Wenger thinks that he's more equal than others. That should be another point on this list, the fact that Wenger gets paid more money than anyone else at the club, so he's an absolute hypocrite, and I actually really hate him for that. So his socialist wage structure has been a disaster, and again, a sackable offence, and everyone was always like, oh, he's really good with money, he's a great financial economist. No, he's not. Something that's always really angered me about Arsenal too is the fact that when we've sold big players, we've always bought replacements from them that are a level down. And I think no better example than this is how we ended up signing Gervinho instead of Juan Mata. We had Mata in the bag. Apparently had a minimum fee release clause for 17 million that was expiring at some point. We didn't meet at the deadline, and then a few weeks later Chelsea ended up paying him for a little bit more money. We basically didn't spend 17 million on Mata, and we spent 12 on Gervinho. So for £5 million more, we could have gotten Mata instead of Gervinho, and we had that money in the bank because we just sold Fabregas. But Wenger thought, I think Gervinho's almost as good as Mata, and look how disastrous that is. Gervinho's probably one of the worst players to ever play for Arsenal, and Mata is a World Cup winner. And Wenger thought it was a good idea to sign Gervinho instead of Mata. Sackable offence. Or at least with Fabregas or Nasri, whichever one Gervinho is the replacement for, at least he was replaced. We sold Alexander Song at the end of last season, despite him having a really good year and finally blossoming into a good player. We sold him to Barcelona for 15 million and we didn't replace him. Sackable offence. Alright, I admit, saying that signing Gervinho instead of Mata is a sackable offence is a little over the top. This one is a sackable offence. Selling Robin Van Persie to Man United. When I was growing up, Man United were our biggest rivals. They still are. Tottenham were just 3 easy points. Man U are always the team to beat. The fact that we are a feeder club, basically, to Man United is an absolute disgrace. And the fact that Wenger was probably willing to sell to Man United instead of a foreign club because they got an extra 4 million is just so wrong in so many ways, and says everything about how Wenger is unambitious, how Ferguson basically just completely walked all over him. I find this really funny how we sold Van Persie to Man United. Man United sold us Silvestre. That's just how things have gone over the last few years, and selling our best player to our biggest rivals is a sackable offence and an absolute disgrace, and I hate Wenger for doing that. And even worse is if we sold Van Persie for 24 million, and again for the last 3 or 4 years, probably 3 years, we have probably had about 30-40 million quid sitting in the bank being ready to spend. If we'd have sold Van Persie for 24 million and then spent 50 million on Edison Cavani, I would have been okay with selling Van Persie. Had we sold Van Persie for 24 million and bought Falcao for 40 million, I'd have been okay. Instead, we bought Giroud for 12 million, a League One player who has had one good season in Ligue 1. I mean, that just says everything. We sell our best player, probably the best player in the Premiership, to our closest rivals, and we replace him with Giroud. Now, no offence, Giroud, I think he's a decent player. He'll make a good target man. But him as Van Persie's replacement makes me want to throw up. Just a joke. Back on that Van Persie to Man U thing, what made it the worst is that we're not really rivals with Man U anymore, are we? If Man U were truly our rivals, we would never have sold them our best player. That would absolutely make no sense. I'm so sad that today Man U fans don't really care about us. You know, they're just like, whatever, Man U, Arsenal, well, that's another easy 3 points for us. Every now and again we'll have a shock win or something. Man U, Arsenal, there's no rivalry anymore. And I hate the fact that Tottenham Arsenal now is. When I was growing up, I didn't care about Tottenham. I didn't know anything about them. We beat them all the time. I knew them; they were our closest rivals, but I didn't really hate them because I didn't have to worry about them. Now Tottenham are our biggest rivals, and even though that's kind of good in a way because it stokes up the old derby tensions, but the fact that Tottenham are even anywhere near us is just a disgrace. And sure, we're always going to fall down a little bit because we built our new stadium, and I do accept that. But the fact that really there isn't much difference between us two clubs at all is just so sad. And I think that had we won a few more trophies here and there, we would still be a better club than Tottenham. But really, there's just not that much between us. And I think, again, Wenger is responsible for our decline in standards, and that just really makes me depressed. Little random one here, but I think this says a lot about Arsene Wenger and, again, his lack of ambition to win things. Just this season, I think the season before something similar happened. We had Olympiacos as our last group game, and this last season in particular, we were still being threatened by Schalke for top spot. We went to Olympiacos, a tough place to go. Instead of going there with the intention of securing top spot, Arsene Wenger fielded a bunch of youngsters and deadwood like Scalacci, what's his name, Janane Mead, Chamak. We basically played Arshavin, players who had no future at our club, for no good reason whatsoever. And because we lost that match, we ended up getting Bayern Munich in the first round, the eventual champions, whereas Schalke played Galatasaray. Now, any good manager, any manager worth their salt, would think to themselves, okay, we have to beat Olympiacos so we can avoid the top finishing slot. But Wenger didn't do that, and what really worries me is that I wouldn't even be surprised if he intentionally lost that match, thinking, alright, I just want to get out of the Champions League nice and early so we can focus on the league, which is completely unforgivable considering the amount of TV revenue we get just by going one more group stage. You probably earn another 10 million quid just for by winning the first knockout round, and we basically fielded a group of youngsters, ended up with Bayern Munich, and we got our asses kicked, and that is a disgrace. Andrei Santos, the worst signing Arsene Wenger has ever made. I don't really need to say much about him, but this guy is on a 50k a week contract for 4 years, and he's just been nothing short of a disaster. I think it also says a lot about Wenger, how he came here and ended up putting on weight. Obviously, he wasn't put under enough pressure to stay fit, and just a complete and utter disaster. Park, Ji-sung Park. Is it Ji-sung Park or is that his cousin? I'm not sure, but I don't know because he's only played for us once. Park, this has got to be another terrible signing from Arsene Wenger. I think he cost 2 odd million. We knew he was going to have to do military service in 2 odd years. We gave him 50k a week. He played a couple Carling Cup matches and a substitute appearance against Man U for whatever reason. And God knows where he is. Why Wenger signed him, I have no idea. This probably signing alone cost us 10 odd million in wages and a transfer fee, so an absolute disgrace. Everyone, again, this quells the myth that Wenger is a really smart economist. He's not if he's signing players like Park and Santos, and they never play. Just a joke. Oh, and how can I forget Scalacci, this guy who spent 2 seasons sitting on the bench on 50k a week, who refused a loan move to Brighton to actually play some game time because he was so comfortable sitting in London doing nothing. Another disgraceful signing. We signed Scalacci for about 5 odd million. Had we spent maybe 3 or 4 more, we could have signed Mertesacker a season early, but because Wenger wanted to be cheap, as usual, he signed Scalacci, and he has cost us a huge amount of money. Another disaster. I think everything that I've listed so far has basically been as a result of Wenger's policies, you know, the signings he's made, the formations he's used, the squad selections he's used. This one I'm about to say now might not be his fault, so it's maybe harsh for me to include it, but I still think that he could have done more to prevent injuries. We have had so many injuries over the last few years, and it really makes me question whether our fitness policy is okay. Are we training these players too hard? Are our physios good enough? I just don't see this kind of systematic year after year injuries in other clubs, and maybe Wenger's signing players with injury records. I know he's just signed Sonogo, who's got an injury record. Maybe it is his fault because Rosicky had injuries before he came to the club. So maybe it is Wenger's fault, maybe not. But I don't think it's a coincidence that we've had so many injuries throughout the year. So yeah, maybe it is Wenger's fault. I don't know. One thing that is Wenger's fault when it comes to injuries is his inability to replace long-term injury players. How many times have we had Eduardo out for a year, yet no replacement striker was brought in on loan or like an old player for a year? Ramsey, he wasn't replaced. Wilshere wasn't replaced. Robin van Persie wasn't replaced. Diaby wasn't replaced. Rosicky wasn't replaced. Vermaelen wasn't replaced. All of these players have had long-term injuries and no backup has ever come in. And it's a joke. Wenger's always talking about how he knows how to sign a good player for cheap. Why has he never just signed like a random backup player just to take care of some of these long-term injuries? He never has, and that has severely cost us. We desperately needed Vermaelen in the 2009-10 season, or 10-11 season. He was out for the whole year. We really needed him, and it cost us so badly not having top-quality centre-back. So another reason why Wenger should be sacked. Tactical problem this. Now, when we signed Giroud, I was kind of open-minded. I thought, when I first saw him, I was like, this guy's quite big. He's strong. Chamakh seemed like a kind of aerial guy, but he never really had the strength to do it, whereas Giroud did. I was like, cool, let's give this guy a chance. But he's largely been ineffectual. In fact, the only games he's ever scored at have been home games against weaker opposition. Apparently, he only scored one away goal in the entire Premiership season. I think one of the reasons why he failed to score so much is we didn't change our tactics to suit him whatsoever. Even though it was a disastrous signing, getting Andy Carroll, Kenny Dalglish brought in wingers and stuff to suit his kind of style of play. Now, maybe I'm really killing my argument by talking about Dalglish and Andy Carroll, but we didn't start playing high balls with Giroud on the pitch. We didn't start playing in crosses into the air with Giroud on the pitch. We didn't bring in a winger who would be able to give him service. So we didn't change our tactics whatsoever. We still played the same ground passing football. That doesn't suit Giroud. And he was basically pretty rubbish the whole season. And in fact, if you ever look at highlights of him at Montpellier, the majority of his goals were from quite direct play. I think there's also another myth about Arsene Wenger is he's great at bringing up young players. If you actually really look at it, the last time he brought in young players who really became a success was in the 2004-05 season when he brought in the likes of Fabregas, Van Persie, Flamini. Maybe you could count Bentner and Denilson and Diaby in there. Basically, all these young signings that actually kind of became decent players were all when we were at Highbury. Since we moved to the Emirates Stadium, we really haven't nurtured that many good young players in. I mean, whatever happened to Vela and Joel Campbell and Wellington, Merida, Bischoff, Afobe, J. Emmanuel Thomas. There are so many young players who've been put in matches that we've probably lost and have never really gone on to be anything. In fact, the last time I think a young player who's really come on to be something is Gibbs. Obviously Wilshere, but he's just such an incredible talent. It would be hard to get him wrong. He's really not brought up any good young players over the last few years, and with a policy about youth, that's a pretty worrying thing to say. So I think it's pretty much a myth that he's still good at bringing in young players. I just don't think he is. Now, as well as Arsene Wenger did actually do in selling Adebayor and Kolo Touré to Man City for £30 million and £15 respectively, he's actually been pretty poor at getting good prices for our best players. If you look at his backers selling Thierry Henry, we sold him for £18 million, our best player, and sure, he was like 29, kind of career in decline, but we sold him to the team who just beat us in the Champions League final. I'm sure we could have gotten a little bit more money for him. We sold Hleb to Barcelona, again a very rich club, for 12 million, the price that we bought him. We sold Song to them for 15 million. He's worth maybe 20, 25. So when it comes to big teams like Barcelona, our rivals, I hate Barcelona. I hate them. They're our rivals. Wenger's a soft touch when it comes to selling players. Van Persie, 24 million. 24 million is what Man U probably got alone on just winning the Premiership, prize money. So that money's already been paid off. So 24 million to our biggest rivals is a joke. So actually, Wenger's not being that good in haggling with other clubs, and in a way, he's a bit of a soft touch. Something that's always annoyed me is the way we don't hold on to players after they've turned 30. The fact that we signed Sol Campbell in 2009 or 10, 3 or 4 years after we let him go, basically is an admittance that Wenger got it wrong by selling him, because he was good enough for us in 2009. He should have been in 2006. Or maybe he was just let go because he didn't like spending the wages on a player like Campbell, who then went on to reach 2 FA Cup finals with Portsmouth. We should have kept hold on to somebody like Sol Campbell. Robert Pires played for Villarreal in the Champions League a number of years after he left us. Should have kept him. William Gallas, even though he wasn't the best defender, he was a part of the Tottenham team that beat us at the Emirates Stadium. We let him go for free, and he then came back to bite us in the arse. So a lot of the time, us letting go of players after they've reached their prime has really hurt us. And I wouldn't include Vieira and Henry in this, because I think that they wanted to leave, and not Arsene wanting them to go. But we should have made more of an effort to stick to these older, experienced players to help out the youngsters. We failed to do so, and I think it's really cost us having those mature heads in tough times. Now this one is probably the worst. I hate the fact that Arsene Wenger calls 4th place trophy. There's no denying that being in the Champions League brings in a lot of revenue. It makes you a more attractive option to players that we never sign. So I like being in the Champions League, but the fact that he equates it to a trophy says everything about him, because it's not a trophy. Maybe it is the team like Tottenham, but I long for the days where we'd win a cup final. And yes, I actually would take missing out in the Champions League for one season if we won a cup. I think it would be worth it. The fact that Wenger doesn't even think that we can do both, either winning cups and stay in the Champions League, says everything about him. Because to him it's like, well, as long as we're in the Champions League, I don't need to win anything else. And that's just absolutely unacceptable, and a disgrace really to a club who would consider a season without a trophy as a failure 10 years ago. It would have been unacceptable to go a year without a trophy, but not in Wenger's head. In Wenger's head, we've won a trophy every single season for the last 15 years. The reason why we are where we are today, and we have the mediocre players we have today, and the reason why we sell all of our best players, is because Wenger hasn't gone that extra mile in the transfer market. I think the 2010-11 season was the biggest example of this. In our squad, we still had Fabregas, Nasri, Wilshere Song, Arshavin. We had a pretty solid squad. We beat Barcelona 2-1 at home. The reason we failed that season is because we had bad goalkeeping and defending. At the start of the season, Arsene Wenger had the opportunity to buy Schwarzer for Fulham for about 2 odd million, and he refused to pay the price. He only wanted him for 1 million. And as a result of that, we were lumbered with Almunia, who is garbage, Szczesny, who is far too young to be put in that position, and the likes of Fabianski and Manone. If we'd have spent 500 extra grand on Schwarzer, we might have not have had the catastrophe we had in the Carling Cup final. Schwarzer might not have made that mistake. Had we not lost that match, maybe we would have won our first trophy in X amount of years. We would have had a lot of confidence. We might have then gone on to beat Barcelona at the Nou Camp. We might have been able to finish in the top 2 that league. After the Birmingham game, our season fell apart. And as a result of that, we lost Nasri and Fabregas. Had we won at least the Carling Cup that year, maybe we could have convinced them to stay, because it looked like we were a winning club. Instead, because of Wenger's reluctance to go that extra 5 million in the transfer market, we didn't win anything. We lost great players, and we're in the mess we are today. And we have always had, at least for the last 3 odd years, that extra 20 million in the bank, and it's just not being spent. The fact that it's not being spent, despite the ticket prices we are paying, the most expensive ticket prices in the world, if I'm not mistaken, our season ticket. It's completely unacceptable that we've been sitting on money and not investing it into the squad, and not going that extra mile in the transfer market has cost us dearly in terms of players and trophies, and that is all down to Wenger. Anyone who's stupid enough to believe in the myth that it's Gazidis and Kroenke, they are wrong. Anybody who knows the club inside will tell you Wenger runs the whole show. He is responsible for everything. Some people even call him a dictator. Every decision that's made at that club goes through Arsene Wenger. So the fact that we haven't gone that extra mile is Arsene Wenger's fault. And apparently he's been quoted as saying, someone asked Arsene Wenger, if I gave you 100 million quid, what would you do with it? And Arsene Wenger said, I'd give it straight back to you. Says all you need to know about Arsene Wenger. He doesn't want to spend that extra bit of money because he's a vain man and he likes to think he's the best. He's a genius and he can win things without spending money, and we haven't, and he's completely living in the clouds. And just going that extra mile in the transfer window would have won us trophies and we'd have kept players, and the fact that we've been sitting on money and he hasn't spent it is absolutely disgraceful, and he should be sacked for that. I think a mistake people make is that when Wenger doesn't spend money, what he's doing is making the club profitable. He's keeping us financially secure. Like I said before, had Wenger spent that extra 5-10 million on players, we would have won a few trophies and kept on to the likes of Fabregas and Nasri. Also, had we done that, what we'd have done is made our club more commercially viable and attractive to new fans. Us not winning anything isn't going to attract the Asian market, the American market, the African market. Winning things is going to be what attracts them stuff. So technically speaking, Wenger might save 10 million in the bank by not spending it on players, but had he spent 15 million and we won some league titles, we might have made that money straight away back in commercial revenue, prize money, new fans, new shirts being sold. So the fact is, we're basically a stagnant club because we're not winning anything. And £80 million sitting in the bank that we have today, sure, that's a lot of money and that's good that we have it there. But we could turn that 80 million into 150 million if we invested it wisely. And if Wenger is this genius that so many people claim he is, then surely he's good enough to spend that money wisely. And frankly, considering the list of players I mentioned earlier, his recent signings, maybe it's a good thing he's not spending that money because he'd most likely waste it on mediocre players. But it is a disgrace how we're basically flatlining. We're not moving ahead because we're not investing in good players. We need to invest to accumulate. And again, Wenger thinks he's this smart ass economist. Well, he's failing yet again. Another problem with Wenger is he lets the board get away with murder. I don't like the board too much. I don't think they're the cause of all our problems. Stanley Kroenke didn't pick the first team sheet that played Bradford. Wenger did. But the fact is, he's a pretty nasty man. He's married into the Walmart family, who are just about the most unethical company you'll ever find. The boards suck. I don't like them one little bit. But the problem with Wenger is I think he shares many of the same ambitions. They're much more concerned about looking at balance sheets rather than trophy cabinets. They're more concerned with shareholders than fans that are in the stadium. So I think Wenger really facilitates the board's greed, and I think Wenger's a part of it. And unfortunately, because Wenger's such a legend, the fans will always forgive him. And de facto, that when they forgive Wenger and his financial policies, they're forgiving the board. And the board are just happily laughing all the way to the bank because there are so many dumb Arsenal fans that will never criticise Wenger, and as a result never criticise Arsenal and the policies the boards are having. And I don't think it's all the board. I think it's Wenger too, and they go hand in hand, caring more about money than trophies, and that bloody sucks. We're at the end, ladies and gentlemen, final one, and you can basically ignore every single point I've just given you and sack Arsene Wenger for this number one reason, and that number one reason is 8 years without a trophy. The fact that we've gone 8 years without a trophy is inexcusable, regardless of building a new stadium, regardless of Chelsea and Man City's money, regardless of the injuries. 8 years without a trophy is a disgrace, and basically an admission from the board and the manager that Arsenal are not a big club, because no big club like Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man U, Inter Milan, AC Milan, Bayern Munich, you name it, would ever accept 8 years without a trophy, ever. And the fact that this man, Arsene Wenger, still has a job just says everything. And the reason why the board, who are cheap, yeah, I'll admit it, like Arsene Wenger, is because he doesn't have the ambition to win. All he cares about, just like the board, is filling his pockets with money. They don't care about winning things. They don't care about the fans. They don't care about trophies. They just care about a nice fat profit sign. And as I explained before, not investing isn't even that good, the economics of the club. So basically, 8 years without a trophy is just disgrace, and Wenger should be sacked for that and that alone. If I haven't convinced you in this video, that's fine. You know, like I still accept some people will want to stick by Wenger because he is a legend, and you know what? I hope I'm wrong, because I grew up loving that guy, and I would love it if he won one more trophy. But the fact is, chances are he probably won't, and if he doesn't invest in this summer, the 70 million we've got in the bank, and if he doesn't win anything, he should be sacked. But the chances are he'll get a nice new fat contract for not winning everything, and the circle and the cycle just goes round, around, around. And Arsene Wenger, as far as I'm concerned, should have gone 3 odd years ago. When we messed up the 2010-11 season, Wenger should have gone there and then. The fact that since then we've had 8-2 and losses to Bradford, and this man has even been considered getting a new contract, just makes me sick. And hopefully my video has encouraged you to think twice about Arsene Wenger, and the fact is, this man is far from infallible. Thank you, and check out my channel. I'm going to make some more Arsenal videos. See you later, guys.